Hi, it's Friday, January 27th, 2012. I'm Peter Martinson, and this is your weather report. Now today we have a very special show for you because so much has happened in the past week or so. Our neighborhood in the galaxy has suddenly flared up. So I'll start by giving an overview of the solar system's weather over the past few days. Then I'll present what appears to be a clear and imminent earthquake warning for the American West Coast. And then we'll finish with a discussion that I had yesterday with David Christie, our congressional candidate up in Seattle, Washington. So, before we go any further, let's review the solar activity for the past 2 weeks. Now, you'll remember this large sunspot group coming around the bend starting last Monday became very, very active very early on. On January 16th, Monday, it unleashed a large M-class solar flare which lasted a long time. Here's a still image of it. Several days later, on January 19th, Thursday, it sent out another long-duration M-class solar flare. Here's a still of that one. And on January 23rd, Monday of this week, it sent out yet another M-class solar flare, which was the largest yet, which almost reached X-class magnitude. Here's a still image of that one. Now, the one on January 16th did send out a coronal mass ejection, but it wasn't aimed at the Earth. It was aimed at Venus. The next one, though, on January 19th, sent out a coronal mass ejection that was aimed at the Earth. By January 22nd, it ended up hitting our Earth's magnetic field and sparking a mild geomagnetic storm. A day later, January 23rd, this solar flare created not only a coronal mass ejection, but another phenomenon called a solar proton storm, which you can see here in the SOHO satellite. There's a coronal mass ejection and then the solar proton storm. So this is the largest solar proton storm that we've seen since 2005, and it ended up blacking out high-frequency radio broadcasts up in the Arctic, forcing several aircraft to divert their flight paths. The associated coronal mass ejection moved extra quickly and struck our planet with another grazing blow Tuesday evening, causing another rather mild geomagnetic storm. Now, as you can see, the sunspot group is slowly lumbering away from us, but it's still exploding as it goes away. Back here on the Earth, we experienced two types of increased activity: the intensification of various storm systems and the explosion of earthquakes. If you recall, the polar vortex weakened dramatically earlier this month. We've now had a chance to feel the effects of this type of a phenomenon. Early last week, a large Arctic blast descended from Canada into the Pacific Northwest. This then got hit by a so-called atmospheric river of high-speed, moist air from the Pacific on Tuesday night, causing not only the first significant winter snowstorm in that region, but a snowstorm of perhaps historic proportions. As the Arctic blast continued towards the southeast, it encountered the southern jet stream. The air in between got compressed into a rare January tornado outbreak that peaked on Sunday, killing at least 2 people. And since then, tornadoes have been spotted down there almost every day. The same system also dumped a rare January thunderstorm on Chicago on Sunday. Now, just to make clear that this is not only an American storm intensification, Eastern Africa also got hit by a tropical cyclone, which intensified into a Category 4 hurricane called Funzo on Monday, with sustained winds up to 135 miles per hour. Now let's look at seismic activity. Up until January 17th, last Tuesday, things have been pretty quiet around the Pacific Ring of Fire, but then things began to explode. If you look, an earthquake swarm took off around the Alaska subduction zone, simultaneously with a breakout of earthquake activity around the Asian side of the Pacific Rim of Fire. Now, most alarming is what happened on the American side of the Pacific Rim. In California, a lot of earthquakes broke out. Mexico had an earthquake swarm, and a bunch of larger earthquakes down in Chile. Now, the strength of all these earthquakes has also intensified. On Saturday, a magnitude 6.3 earthquake hit Mexico. On January 22nd, the next day, South Sandwich Islands region, which is also part of the Pacific Rim of Fire, got hit by a magnitude 6.0. On January 23rd, Chile got hit by a magnitude 6.2. And January 24th, a magnitude 6.3 hit in the Fiji Islands region. Now, the sun may not have caused these earthquakes to happen, but the solar storms probably did help intensify the situation. So now that's the basic report. Since last Monday, weather has exploded both on the sun and on the Earth. It's not one causing the other, but whatever is causing the intensification on the sun is also driving the intensification on the Earth. Based on this, the immediate forecast is, as both of the candidates, David Christie and Summer Shields, have stated, the American West Coast is in the immediate crosshairs of a large earthquake that could be deadly. This is in the immediate days ahead. There are also other clear precursory warnings lighting up the area, such as anomalous changes in the ionosphere over the region. So let me be clear. The earthquake may not happen, but the necessary indications point to an immediate threat of a large earthquake somewhere along the American West Coast, probably within the next week. So I would suggest the relevant authorities take proper precautionary measures. Now let's see what David Christie has to say. I'm here today with Dave Christie, who is our congressional candidate up in Seattle, Washington. How's it going, Dave?
Good. How are you, Peter?
Pretty good, thanks. So it's good to see you. Now, just a few days ago, last Wednesday or so, you guys got hit by a pretty major snowstorm, which is actually, it's known as the biggest snowstorm so far this winter for the entire United States. And, you know, Seattle is known for, the whole Puget Sound area is known for just getting shut down when there's a major snow event. So I was wondering if you could just give people a sense of what are the conditions up there, what does it look like, and how is the area handling this storm?
Well, perhaps the way to discuss it would be to refer to how they did not handle it before, because this time was relatively better handled, but we still had 250,000 people without power, 250,000 customers without power. We still, to this day, or up to today, have 12,000 people without power from that storm. But there's also an additional 38,000 people without power from the windstorm we had last night. And as we were discussing earlier, that may have been aggravated by the coronal mass ejection that we just had from yesterday. But what happened last year was, because of the environmentalist insanity, which is very well known here in the Pacific Northwest, they refused, number one, both monetarism and environmentalism. Monetarism, they refused to get the snowplows, to buy the snowplows, and just figured that they'd roll their dice and maybe hope that Al Gore was right and that we were actually going into global warming and that we were not going to get these types of storms. But they refused to get the snowplows. Then when they got the snowplows, they refused to use salt because they were afraid that the salt might damage our precious salmon, and so we had people sliding out of control, getting into accidents. I don't know what kind of damage, but I'll just give you one story of this. My wife was stuck in that storm, and in what is about normally a 45-minute trip from Tacoma to Seattle, took her somewhere around 10 hours. She didn't even make it home, which is north of Seattle, and it ended up getting a hotel overnight in downtown Seattle because it was so insane that the roads were just completely undrivable.
And you guys just live in northern Seattle, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was a whopping 7 miles away from home, and she couldn't make it that 7 miles because of how bad the road conditions were. So I think the public outcry resulted in them actually moving and doing the salting and so on to make it a little bit more manageable, but nonetheless, the city is still shut down. The power outages. I was calling around that night in terms of just organizing people, and this elderly gentleman was just completely panicked, saying, "Who is this? I can't talk right now. I can't talk politics right now. I've got to figure out how I'm going to make it through the night. I've got to get the blankets together. I've got to figure out how I'm going to make sure I survive." Now, this was a guy who was still mobile. I don't know how many of our seniors were stuck without power, unable to get their heating working, lights to deal with the crisis. So
Or even
And
without
then
power
also-
now. You say that windstorm knocked out power last night, too.
Yeah, another 38,000 customers. So I don't really know how many that, actual individuals that translates into. But then you also have the hospitals were shut down in this power outage as well. And again, I'll make another point on this windstorm that we had last night. A few years back, we had another windstorm, which was not all that dramatic, but because the budget cuts, the cities couldn't actually come up with the money to just do the tree trimming that was normally under the budgets of the city. And so windstorm comes and power lines are down, and people were without power, I think in that windstorm for over 2 weeks. And I tell you, people get into a very different frame of mind. It's one of survival. It's one of they're in this sort of state of panic, which is not. You get a real sense of how far we are, or how close we are to losing civilization in those kinds of crises. Obviously, with major power outages, you're dealing with water treatment, sewage, hospitals, medical supplies. What's that?
Refrigeration,
everything. And this is due to these storms, but also, I'm sure, Peter, what you are very familiar with, which is if these types of electromagnetic pulses coming towards the Earth were to blow out major the power grids, we could be in sustained well over a year long without power in this country.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this is what I want to get to. Is LaRouche has proposed that we put the entire economic recovery of not just the United States but the whole planet under the umbrella of an extended Mars program of development of man in the solar system and becoming a true solar species. What I wanted to ask you is what would that look like in particularly your region in terms of relatively larger or smaller disasters like this? How would that interact with dealing with this type of problem?
Well, first off, just to make it clear, the only way we're going to be able to deal with these problems and the only way we'd be able to launch a space program is to dump Obama. And that just needs to be said in every forum over and over and over. This is a guy who is a strict adherent to the oligarchical principle that mankind should not and cannot know anything about the universe in which we live in. We are like peasants subject to the whims of Zeus. But in terms of this region is actually it will become a new crossroads of civilization, launching what we are leading as a national slate of LaRouche candidates around the nation. That the core of the economic recovery, once we remove Obama, get the Glass-Steagall through, launch the Hamiltonian-style credit system, which will enable the financing of these projects, or really that these projects are what gives us the credibility and the credit to do this, because it's debt that's extinguishable, as Hamilton would say, and it has the rates of growth that are needed to leapfrog out of the depth of the crisis that we face right now. But for this region, Boeing had a number of facilities in Kent. There's a whole area, the so-called Kent Valley, which has all kinds of machine shops, warehouses, but Boeing had a large facility there that was a part of the Apollo program. They did part of the Saturn V rocket. They did the lunar rover, I believe. So this area already has much to do with aerospace, other firms as well. Aerojet. There's a number of the different firms in the region that would be playing a part in a Mars mission. But when you put the Mars mission as the umbrella for everything else that will unfold from that, which is NWAPA, of course, to deal with our water supply, which has the added component of what we will be absolutely central for this area, which is the Sawtooth Mountain pump system, over in Idaho, the Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho. And the Sawtooth Mountains, on one side you have the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, and then on the other side you have the Idaho National Labs, which could be the basis for the nuclear power generated to get that water pumped up over the Sawtooth Mountain, and have the added dimension of the type of power density that would be needed in that area for different experiments around fusion development and the kinds of, but that's the other point, is that with a Mars mission, the only way that we're going to get people there is with the fusion rockets, which of course you bring. That's not just simply we're just going to make some rockets, develop fusion just for the rockets, right? We'll be developing fusion as the new power source for this planet. And to even really deal with the types of electricity going through the power lines, we'd have to upgrade our power grid to superconductive cables.
In order to transmit the power for the region, in order to support like a real development of the fusion in the laboratories, you're saying?
Yes, exactly. And just to even transmit it just for energy consumption for the population. And so right there, you're dealing with a capability that, frankly, there's dangers dealing with having these power lines like this. You know, we should probably bury these cables. Frankly, I'd like to bury them just for the sheer aesthetics of the whole matter. I think they're kind of ugly. But you know, that would be one aspect of being able to have a more secure foundation for not having these types of power outages and so on. But upgrade the grids. Now, the other part of this is and perhaps something like the Kent Valley would actually play in for all the construction around Nawapa. That area and the Puget Sound area in general is going to play a huge role in all of the development around Nawapa, Arctic development, and so on. But one of the other things that's been brought up is on these transformers, we only have one company in the United States that produces the 345 kilowatt variety of the, or kilovolt, I guess it is, variety of these transformers. And for the 500 and 765 kilovolt, we don't have any companies in the United States, and those transformers handle 80% of the entire population of the United States. So if we were to have a major incident where these transformers blew out or frankly just get old, we wouldn't even be able to get our power grid back online. So we're going to have, this is all part of the economic recovery policy, is ensuring that we have a backup capability. There was one estimate that it only would cost $150 million to be able to deal with the kind of major surges that we will face from the question of the increased solar activity as we go into this new galactic phase. So this all would play into the overall economic recovery in terms of the jobs and so on, but it's all has to be oriented with this driver program of a Mars project. That's got to be the crucial driver for this planet and not just our country.
So you could say that being prepared for, when disaster strikes, that's just a basic function of having a full set operating real economy like LaRouche is proposing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, frankly, we should be to the point now where we launch a Mars program, you're not going to be able to have the insanity that is going on in this society, in this world, under the British imperial policy, which of course Obama is just a complete puppet of being on the verge of a thermonuclear showdown to wipe out human population. This is just insanity. But we should be at a point, as far as I'm concerned, with the question of the things such as the power grid, which should just be a no-brainer. But we should be at the point that it'd be a little bit like right now if a major fire wiped out, or just a fire that was manageable, wiped out Seattle because we didn't have a fire department. I mean, we should get to that point where the idea of us having downed power for extended periods of time should just be like, well, that's like the Dark Ages. What in the hell is your society part of the Dark Ages, right? So this should just be, and when we launch a mission to Mars, you're going to have an organization of society that actually reflects that kind of outlook. The idea that something as archaic as these types of power outages would just be seen as archaic as not having a fire prevention system, you know.
Uh-huh. Now, just to finish it up, what would you propose that, I mean, we've said it before, but what should people do right now? What should be done right now in order to get to that point that we're talking about?
Well, look, at this point, look at what you see with Obama. We said over and over with the Hitler mustache that LaRouche put on this guy. He has absolutely shown that he deserves the Hitler mustache, and that he has got to be thrown out. And any discussions of what we can do in terms of dealing with the economic crisis and everything else that just has to be emphasized. He's got to go. And once we restore Glass-Steagall and launch the Hamiltonian credit policy, we could launch this Mars mission as the umbrella, really, for everything else that comes with NWAPA, Arctic development, and all this. This becomes just not only feasible, but frankly, the way the rest of the world is going. If you look across the Pacific Ocean to Russia, China, they are already committed to the kind of development. There was just another case where the former, I don't know if he was a prime minister or not.
Former foreign minister.
Foreign minister, yeah. It just came out with another statement saying that we should be involved in cooperating around Arctic development. So and if you look at every one of the proposals that LaRouche has put forward around the Strategic Defense Initiative, the question of a relationship between the U.S. and Russia on setting up a base on the moon, this is all now on the table. And the rest of the world wants to not just avoid war, but set up the conditions for economic cooperation between nations that will give a true war avoidance policy, because we'd be launching the type of economic renaissance that is the absolute necessity, is that it has to be based on the pushing the frontiers of science and technology, getting to the point where human creativity is central to everything within the economy. So I'd say this to anybody that says, well, what do we do about this crisis? There's only one way to deal with this crisis, which is to put it in the context of the breakdown of the entire international financial system, and that there's a very narrow path to get out of this mess, which means Obama goes, Glass-Steagall, Hamilton, what I've just laid out and what LaRouche has laid out clearly. So that's mobilize with us, mobilize with the national slate. There's no other political leadership in the country right now. This Republican presidential debate is just a clown show, and we know what we get with Obama. So we've got to mobilize with us.
All right. Well, this is great. Thanks a lot for being with us today, Dave.
All right. Take care, Peter.
You too, Dave.